everybody. I'm Christine Barr, and this is Today Over Tea, where we have real conversations about things that matter. I'm a dancer, businesswoman, traveler, and host. And today, we're creating an open-minded space with hopes of spreading awareness and education through similar experiences. I'm going to introduce you to some of the most passionate and knowledgeable people in my life. 2020 is the time to own who you are, reach your highest potential, and just love your life. Because let's face it, we're all going through something, but it's time to evolve as a society. We need to spread more kindness and love for each other and this planet. So let's start the conversation. Hello, everyone. I'm so excited. It's been a minute since we've been filming because of all the craziness happening in the world, but I have been wanting to talk to this amazing man right here for so long, and I'm so excited that we finally can get together and do this.
Yeah, me too.
So
Absolutely.
great. So before we started kind of getting into this, we were discussing just how the world is changing and how we are talking about more taking care of ourselves, especially during this pandemic. Tony, this is Tony Nunez, by the way, for those of you who don't know. He's been very active in our group, and he has so many things that he's starting and discussing, and so I can't wait for you guys to hear what he has to say. But yeah, so let's dig right in.
All right.
Let's dig in. Let's get a little drink here. Thank you. Spill all the tea.
Oh my gosh. There's so much, right?
There's so much.
Well, I mean, I think it just starts with like how everybody's been functioning in terms of what the lessons of quarantine and COVID have taught us, right? About ourselves, about the world, about everything. And I know you've had a couple of conversations about this in terms of like when it came to Black Lives Matter. I was just so shocked when I was online and when the whole George Floyd incident happened and how it was, of course, yet another repetitive incident. However, this time being so blatant, and it just hurt so many of us to our soul, our hearts.
Yeah.
And then I just saw from our industry, from our dance industry, so much racist, just outright racist perceptions of what was happening.
I feel like people were finally free to say what they felt, and whether they were on one side or the other, they didn't feel scared to express that anymore.
Exactly.
And I think that definitely just shocked a lot of people.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like it was like my mouth was like open every time I opened up Facebook or Instagram or anything.
Facebook's
I was just. It's
been a really interesting place to be. Like I've definitely shut myself out a little bit for a little while.
You have to.
Thank God for that unfollow button.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it got really, really intense. And I think because, we live we work in such an industry that professes to be so warm and inclusive.
Right.
And but then seeing the reality of that, then it brought out all of the things that I had experienced that I had just kind of put away.
You don't think about in the moment.
I never thought about in the moment, whether it was just being, gay in our industry or whether it was being, very Puerto Rican or whatever it is, or my personality, super flamboyant. I know people like to say, oh, well, there's a ton of gay dancers.
Oh my God, people say that all the time. They're like, so you're just surrounded by gay men all the time. I'm like, no, I'm not. I was like, most of them are straight and dating their partners.
Correct.
I was like, it's basically the same representation of the world, just in a smaller value.
Exactly.
Like, I don't see why people think that.
Exactly right. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And the other thing, though, too, is that it's a smaller representation as far as the actual like percentages of people and numbers and diversity, but it's also a smaller representation in perception as well. So I always think of the dance world as kind of like a microcosm of the United States, like a little mini microcosm of the United States. Because when you think about it, like historically, and I know there are judges and coaches out there who will back me up on this. I mean, even though there were a lot of gay people historically throughout ballroom in terms of that have made an impact on our industry in general, like Rude Vermey, like Louis Van Ansel, like a lot of, like Forrest Vance in the American style, like a lot of different people, Michael Chapman, absolutely, a lot of people that made an impact on our industry. But it wasn't really 35 years ago, not quite 35 years ago, where if you went to Blackpool, you were not taken seriously if you were not married to your partner. So what that did was it perpetuated a whole generation of if there were gay people that if they wanted to be serious about their dancing, they had to live this facade of a life with being married to their partners. And so there was a lot of that. There was, and then just kind of going through my own experiences, like, oh, Tony, like, butch it up, like a coach would tell me, like, in a coaching, or stop being so femme, or blah, 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 blah. And at the time, we are programmed where, oh, they're gay too, so it's okay. Or they're just my friend, so it's okay for them to say things like that. They want me to, yes. So we allow for that programming to happen. We allow for that programming to really develop in us. And then what it does is it changes who you are as a dancer, because the biggest part of our dancing is artistry. I think it's artistry first and sports second.
Oh, totally.
You know what I mean? Even though people nowadays will reverse it when they train. But like in concept, it's artistry first and then sports second.
Correct.
So like you said, if we are artists and we can't express our own individual artistry as it is, then we're not expressing our artistry, so we're not going to be effective out there.
That's it.
And
then we might as well all be doing, that's one of the biggest reasons why ballroom dancing is not in the Olympics, is because it cannot be judged by a number with like a dive and everybody looks the same going into the pool. Like, it's just not that way. We have so many different aspects of individuality and artistry and creative, things going on that it can't be judged the same way.
Correct. Yeah, it is a very subjective thing.
Right.
And at that point, there are things that can be universal, specifically when we do like the pro-am judging, right? We're like, okay, footwork, posture, timing, frame, connection, blah, 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 rhythmicality, yada, yada, yada. Like, those things are pretty standard. And we can judge it accordingly. Outside of those things, once people master those things or get to a good level with them, at what point do we allow for them to express artistry? And I think because there's, ballroom dancing is very set in its own trend. I kind of feel like sometimes it can be, as a style of dance, a caricature of itself. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like we're super expressive on the floor sometimes, like more than like a modern dancer, like Twyla Tharp even, you know what I mean? Like, we're just like doing all of these crazy things and affectations that really have nothing to do with maybe how we sincerely feel, because we're just trying to make sure it's projecting big and projecting out, right?
Yeah.
So I really started to kind of develop this sense of within this past year, like, first of all, who am I? I know exactly who I am when I step off the floor. But all of the things that I've had to contort my brain into when stepping onto the floor because of all the programming that I had been given from all of my coaches. And not all of them. I'm just saying over the years.
And not even bad. Like, I think just so people don't get the wrong idea, like, the coaches do their job.
Absolutely.
And they're great at their job.
Absolutely.
But the thing is that they're not trying to make you the person that you should be. They're trying to make you a champion dancer, period. That's their goal, and that's amazing at what they do. But you have to kind of navigate your own mental health through that.
Absolutely.
So that you don't get lost in what they want you to become on the dance floor.
100%.
I think that's where you're getting at.
100%, especially because, and there were times, I feel like pre-videos, like access videos on our phones, and quick recordings, before all of that, when you actually had to VHS some of your coachings of choreography, or worse yet, write your choreography from your coaches.
Yeah.
There was more of an opportunity, like you could remember what the coach did, but there was more of an opportunity to make that your own. And so I think in times prior to, I'll say prior to 2005, you could definitely see in any given final a lot of the individuality of the couples,
right?
Regardless of if they got the same coaches, the same coaching from the same coaches.
I really felt like everyone had their own thing, and now it feels a little bit like there's a blurriness happening.
Yes,
I agree with
absolutely.
that.
There's
like a standard, just kind of like the same in Hollywood.
Yeah.
We see what so-and-so looks like and everyone gravitate towards, oh, how can we get as close to that look as possible?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's
Absolutely.
scary because that is completely the opposite of individuality and trying to be your own unique person. When everybody tells you, be you,
yeah,
it's like, but look like that.
Right. Yep,
it doesn't really make a lot of sense.
Exactly.
You can't do
They're
both.
like, Tony, I just want you to dance who you are, be you, but make it look like you want to make love to Oksana on the dance floor. And I'm like, record scratch. Like, what did you just say?
I'm sorry.
Okay,
no.
that's
definitely
me.
not what me would be doing.
Sure. Like, the me would be like sharing Oksana's dress when she's not wearing it. Like, that's the real me. And no, I'm kidding. But which leads.
No, but seriously, but that's okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Which leads me to my whole concept of in any given dancer, and the reason why I love my current dance partnership so much is because in any given dancer, whether you're male or whether you're female, whether you identify as male or you identify as female, it doesn't matter. What we all have feminine and masculine traits to us.
Absolutely.
Right? We all have these feminine and masculine like elements that exist within us. And I feel it's kind of like when you're dancing, you can't show quickness all the time by being quick all the time. Like, in order to show the quickness, you actually have to slow down, right? You heard coaches say that, right? In order to show the power, there has to be tender moments.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Otherwise,
because it's contrast.
Right.
It's why do we enjoy the sun? Because we get rain.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
you have to have one to appreciate the other.
You absolutely cannot see masculinity if the dancer doesn't fully accept his feminine parts.
I agree with that.
At all.
So let me ask you this though, because then I feel like the contradiction to that would be, well, that's why there's two. You have a male and you have a female in the partnership. So your job is not to be feminine. Your job is to be masculine.
Right.
So how would you contradict or just counter that, I guess?
Is that both of us are required to exhibit both feminine and masculine traits. And that's why I was like saying that I dig my partnership so much because there's times where she's very soft and sultry, and then there are times where she's just very powerful. Yeah. And I think that there's something super sexy about about a powerful woman who's very like commanding and demanding of attention and presence and things like that. And
just being solid in who she is. That's not trending in the world right now.
Of course.
I mean, awesome.
And there are men who just are like just drool over that.
Yeah.
So if that's beautiful and attractive and men and women alike love that, then why shouldn't she be able to exhibit that on the dance floor?
Right.
Why shouldn't she be able to also exhibit her masculine and feminine portions of who she is?
Right.
And so where it comes down to is the blending of it. Are we both masculine at the same time? Because then the picture is a little too intense. Are we both feminine at the same time? Then the picture is just right. So what we have to do is what it comes down to is, which is what has been great for us in this break in our practice time, is it just boils down to, okay, when you want to speak and you want to be more powerful in this area, then I will like acquiesce and just kind of be a support, and then vice versa, right? And it would irk me for so many years when judges would say, oh, I just hate it when the partnership, there's competition within the partnership, when they're competing for the attention at the same time. And I'm just like, well, what does that mean? Like if, and they would oftentimes equate it to maybe a girl who was too powerful or a guy who was too effeminate or flamboyant, right? And I would be like, okay, so wait, are you just saying that he can't be effeminate and she can't be, powerful and more masculine?
And why are they relating it to competition when it should be, like you said, a conversation?
Correct.
Yeah.
So I think what they really meant
Yeah.
was, I'm gonna
speak for
here's
them.
the caveat, I'm gonna clarify for them. What they really mean when they say that,
Yeah.
they really mean, they get to a place where they don't wanna see two powerful people going at it at the same time. They want to see, yes, one powerful person and then one supportive,
One light, one
you know,
dark, for
yeah,
sure.
exactly, in that contrast. But that should not mean, however, that we can't flip that.
Right.
And I'm not saying like, okay, now we're gonna be all doing reverse leads or whatever.
No,
That's
for sure.
fine if you want to. However, I'm just thinking in movement, in connectivity,
Right.
in grounding, in choreography, you know, those types of things is where we explore the diversity of the conversation.
Right, I was gonna say the depth that
The
you're
depth.
creating with that. Because if you limit yourself to only being able to express one certain emotion or one certain masculine, feminine, what have you,
Right.
then you're really limiting the conversation and you're
Right.
limiting what you can do. Eventually, they will see everything they've seen from you.
Right.
But the concept is that you can evolve and develop and grow, and the more you get to know each other as a partnership, the more you can then play with that masculine, feminine energy.
Right.
And
Yes.
then create a brand new performance, and that's when they're like,
Yeah.
"Oh wow, I've never seen you dance like that before." And it's
Exactly.
like, exactly.
It started to hit me when, you know, the same-sex rule opened up where same-sex partnerships could come onto the dance floor.
Yes,
So clearly
that
what
recently happened. It happened
this past September.
Okay. Yeah.
So what wound up happening is when that happened, it was like, I was like, oh my gosh, it was great because I had students that wanted to dance with me, and it was really, really great.
Yeah.
And Oksana had a bunch of my girls that wanted to dance with
Oh,
her.
yes.
So it was really, really nice just as far as like the financial side of it, you know what I
Totally.
mean?
Yeah.
Explore that. And for me, I was just like thinking, I was excited about it. And one of my coaches, my dance mom, Susie Thompson, she's like, I hope this doesn't mean you're gonna dance with a guy because I love Oksana for you. And I was just like, oh my God, no. And I
You're
thought
like, I love Oksana.
exactly. I was like, I thought about it for a second. I'm like,
Yeah.
well, yeah, I would love to dance with a guy because, and I thought about why I wanted to dance with a guy. Well, I wanted to dance with a guy because number one, I could, when it came to romantic things, I could maybe be more honest with my approach, right? When it came to romantic things, like, you know, whatever.
Because you're representing who you are off the floor,
Correct.
and that's your
Correct.
truth. Yeah.
And then the other thing I thought about was because I myself wanted to exhibit like, you know, both masculine and feminine traits because that's who I really am. As a kid growing up, you know, I was in a very religious, machismo, Latino-based family, and it was, I would be like scolded all the time if I was too effeminate. So when I first came out of the closet, and I was like 16, 17 years old, when I first came out of the closet, I was like screaming. Like there was like no stopping me from
That's
doing
it. You're
all
like,
of it, right?
"Where's the
I was like,
glitter?
here I am.
Yes.
And then, of course, eventually I kind of mellowed out and kind of
Right.
had a really good blend. And I loved that Tony, you know, that Tony that first came out of the closet, because you have to go really far in one direction to kind of find exactly who you are. You know what I mean?
Well, and I think that's what is, I'm hoping that as things start to, the world needs to mellow out in that regard.
Right.
Because I think that the reason that we have so much extremity on that side is because people are trying to prove I am allowed to live in this truth.
Correct.
And that's so, like, if we just allow everyone to be who they want to be, black, white, gay, straight, whatever, then they don't have to
Be so extreme.
Be so extreme and be like, I have to wear all this stuff and be, now if you want to, go for it. That's going to be some people.
Yeah. But they don't have to do it to prove
They don't
a
have to
point.
do it to validate,
who they are.
And I
yes.
think that's what we're seeing, is that a lot of people are just expressing themselves based on, well, this person is doing it extreme, so I should do that because I now associate myself with that community. And that's just not a healthy place to be, even for that person who feels like they're living in their truth, because you're still living.
It's true, but it's
Yeah.
also part of the journey.
Yeah.
Is my point, is that sometimes you have to go so far in one direction in order
Yeah.
to find your own balance.
Totally.
Because you were so not allowed to go into that direction for so long.
Yeah.
Right. So currently, it's part of the journey. And do I ever think that we'll have full acceptance where people are? I think that it's gotten great. It's gotten way more progressive, and it's
Yeah.
gotten way better. And the kids now that are like, you know, gay and coming out in high school now, their coming out stories are just so cheerful and sweet and like wonderful.
I have noticed that,
They're just, which was so clearly different from I don't want to say in my day, like I don't want to say that, but from when I came out,
No, absolutely.
those stories were all so traumatic. You know what I mean? Like we're all so traumatic, and whether they worked out great or not, you know,
the initial,
it was just so traumatic. It was unbelievable. So, yes, do I think that we're progressing in the right direction in terms of like acceptance? Absolutely. Do I think, you know, we have a long way to go still? Yes, absolutely. But part of what I felt about this whole process was, okay, I've had this journey that I'm in love with the journey that I've always been on, and that just helps me always be in love with me. You know what I mean? Like I love who I am, and I've always loved who I am, for all the mistakes and all the flaws. Because if you don't have those, then you're not going to be this person that you're not a complete person, right? No. Like if you don't have those, and you don't have full acceptance of those, and you don't have those, you don't learn, right?
Well, it's the inner work. I mean, I think that even outside of sexuality, what people are learning right now in this pandemic is that like, oh, am I the person I want to be? Am I showing up in my relationship?
Right.
Am I showing up for myself, for my kids, for my job, whatever? Exactly. And I think a lot of people are realizing that they are putting on a mask every morning, figuratively, and going to work, and whatever it is that comes their way, they're brushing it off, and they're like, oh, well, it doesn't matter, and then they go home, and then they deal with that internally, even whether they know it or not, and then it builds until...
See, this is the concept where I feel roles are a part of everybody's life. Yeah. We all have different roles, you know, mother, father, son, daughter, husband, wife, girlfriend, boyfriend, brother, sister. We all have different roles, you know, whether exactly, fiance, yes. Whether you're going to a, whether you're a lawyer, you're a nurse, whatever it is, we all have these different roles. The roles themselves are not the issue. Yeah. Men are not the issue. White people are not the issue. It's how we as a society execute those roles. So there are toxic concepts within the function of those roles that we adhere to at times where we really don't need to adhere to them. Right. And that's where we get slippery. It gets to be a slippery slope, and that's where the judgments come in, and that's where everything kind of, people get put in these like really, extreme categories.
Boxes. So boxes. We were talking about this on one of my other podcasts, just about roles in society and how people are like, that's how we conversate. That's a conversation starter. What do you do? And it's like, when you think about that question, one of my friends, he's like, oh gosh, I hate that question.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
It's the worst.
Absolutely.
Because even if you love what you do, we're so proud to tell people we're ballroom dancers, we're entrepreneurs, we're whatever, but that's not all we are.
Right.
It's not defining, and what happens is that the minute you tell somebody what you are, and it's something that they can relate to a role in society, boom, that's who you are now to them. And so they're gonna start gearing the conversation towards asking questions about that particular thing, or they're not thinking that you may be a ballroom dancer, but you also know about science. They're not gonna ask you science questions because you didn't say you were a scientist. Right,
exactly.
So the thing is that that's the hard part, is I think that on top of being more accepting with LGBTQ and black and white and all these other things that we're going through, it's about just people, I think society feels more comfortable with putting people in a box because then I can figure out who you are. There's no surprise.
It also helps them to some extent execute social etiquette in a very traditional way.
Right. And I'm going to talk to you differently than I would someone else because I know now kind of who you are.
Correct.
And I know what can pass.
Correct.
And I think that that's honestly their own fears and their own projections that they're putting onto someone, because it's like, what if you just didn't know that person and they didn't tell you what they did and you had to figure it out through a conversation of, what do you desire? What are your value system? Like, why don't we ask those questions?
Well, but that's a great point.
Yeah.
But here's the reason why we don't.
Yeah.
I'll tell you the answer.
We're getting all today.
The reason why we don't is because as a society, I've always felt that we have a basic fear of intimacy. And intimacy, and this is why our industry as ballroom dancers is so effective.
Yeah.
Because we're not just selling dancing. We're not just selling, and teaching dancing.
Yeah.
Like outside of your spouse or your boyfriend and girlfriend or your kids, when are you ever within 6 inches of another human being?
Right.
Right?
Oh, totally.
So just the actual execution of somebody in your physical space.
We're selling connection.
Yes.
And intimacy, yeah.
It creates immediate intimacy.
Yeah.
There's immediate physical intimacy, which is
Right.
why we also have an industry where a lot of boundaries and lines get blurred, because
Right.
a lot of people, no matter how powerful or rich or where they come from or poor, does not matter, physical intimacy is oftentimes misconstrued as emotional intimacy.
Right.
My basic concept of how I teach is to make sure people are provided, whenever I'm on a lesson with them, they are provided a safe space for that intimacy. They can feel safe within that intimacy.
Right.
And I really go out of my way to provide a safe space for people to be vulnerable and
Yeah.
express their intimacy.
And just to clarify, so people don't get it the wrong way. Yes, in our industry, there are people that, like you said, lines get crossed, things
Right.
get blurry. But for the most part, we have some amazing professionals in this industry. And what Tony is describing is what a lot of good professionals do, is creating a space where people, if they maybe have issues with their spouse and they don't have that intimate conversation going on, they can confide in you. They can feel like they can open up about their desires, things that they want to do. You're giving them a dream come true to be able to express themselves on a platform that they never thought possible.
Absolutely.
But it doesn't get physical, is what I'm saying.
Well,
like, you know what I'm saying?
Yes, correct. It's layered because
Yeah.
yes, that's part of it. Like
Yeah.
for them to express themselves is one thing. Absolutely. They express themselves through their dancing, and oftentimes you are like their psychologist or their hairdresser.
That's
you
it.
know what I mean? The relationship is accelerated. The actual intimacy of the friendship is accelerated because there is
physical touch.
forced
Totally.
physical intimacy.
Totally.
When I say forced physical intimacy, I'm just talking about the dancing.
Well,
you know
that's
what I
the
mean?
thing, and I think that that's where the terminology can get a little bit misconstrued,
Right.
because we hold in a frame, like you said, we're within a
Right.
few inches of each other, but we are very respectful of that space. I dance with men that are 40, 50 years older than me. I dance with sometimes kids,
Of
like
course.
all of the things.
Of course.
And we have to explain to everybody how to properly do that.
Correct.
And we went, just a quick side story, we went with one of Noel's friends in Boston to just a salsa club, just a fun night. And he had never been before. And he was, his observation was crazy, because when we're in it, we don't really see a lot of
Yeah,
that
of
stuff.
course.
We're just like, that's normal.
Of course, yeah.
And then, so we go, and he saw how we acted with people we did not know, but we were in a salsa community in Boston. We were like, hey, we'll become friends quickly. And how I dance with people and how he danced with people, knowing that we're together. And he's like, how people just respect you, and how they come up and ask you to dance, or they look at him knowing that you guys are together and you didn't even have to say anything, and they ask, hey, can I dance with her? And then the way that they touch you, like they touch you in places that you would think would not be, especially in salsa. They're grabbing you on the shoulder, the hip, everything. And I'm totally fine with that, because I know it's coming from a place of respect.
Absolutely.
And he was completely floored by that, because he's like, how do you gain that much trust in such a short amount of time?
Yes.
And I'm like, yeah, it's just something that when you join a community like this, and you find the creepers, I mean, they're everywhere.
Of course,
I mean,
absolutely, absolutely.
There's always something.
Absolutely.
But there's a mutual energy understanding that's happening between the time he's asking me to dance to the time we go onto the floor to the first couple of steps. And we start to feel, okay, I'm comfortable in this space, and you're creating a space I feel comfortable in.
Absolutely.
And vice versa, that I'm not being too aggressive to him.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And for outside people to see that, I think that's such the beauty of our industry.
Yes, absolutely. It's getting a common space where you both are feeling safe to exercise that type of intimacy, that type of physical intimacy, but also have that fluid connectivity, right?
Yeah.
And I always love an outsider's perspective about
totally.
about the dance world in general, because what most people don't understand, well, what they understand that isn't necessarily accurate, is they have a basic concept of the sexualization of dancing. And there's such an extreme sexualization of dancing, which is why, in society in general, which is why we had a problem passing that same-sex rule. That's why when somebody asks that question, oh, what do you do for a living? You know, you're like, okay.
Right.
And it's not that you're, like you said, it's not that you're not proud of being a dancer, but of course you immediately know automatically when you say that, you are going to be sexualized.
Oh, totally.
Right?
I mean, we moved to Vegas and they're like, I mean, I had to remember, I have to add ballroom in front of that. I can't just say I'm a dancer.
Correct.
Because if I say I'm a dancer, they think I'm a stripper.
Right, exactly.
Automatically because I'm living in Vegas. And it's like, you know, am I offended in the moment? No, I'm not offended because you know that's coming.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, why do we put where do those initial, like, what's the root of the issue? You know what I'm saying?
I'll tell you.
No,
I'm just kidding. I'm just
But
kidding.
you know what I'm saying?
I do,
like
yeah.
that
I do.
if we go back, people are just saying what society has been proven to be accepted.
Correct.
And if we automatically, when someone says I'm a dancer, don't go into a certain headspace and we be more open-minded and say, or even a lawyer, right? How many people say they're a lawyer and it's like, oh, you're automatically a liar.
Right.
Right? And that's such a stereotype that's just terrible. You know,
Absolutely.
like that all of a sudden now, because you said this word, now all of a sudden you have X, Y, and Z. And it's like, isn't that the definition of a stereotype?
Absolutely.
Like that we try to break those
Absolutely,
things.
absolutely.
And I think now more than ever is when we're trying really to create new thought processes and break those, and not even break the stereotype. Don't even have a stereotype to begin with. Automatically when you meet someone, just go into it knowing that it's going to be completely different from the first person you met.
100%.
You know,
100%.
Don't have any preconceived
100%.
notions of anything, because I think those preconceived notions is what gives people comfort. If I already go into it knowing that you may be like this, then I already feel more comfortable talking to you. And it's like, but you're projecting your own fears onto me, and now all of a sudden, I'm this person that I am not in your head.
Amen.
And
so then
now I
everything
have to
that
start
you
breaking down all of those
Right.
things that you think I am.
And everything that you say is now tainted.
Totally.
But yes.
Yeah, and so I feel like when you meet someone, if it's not a genuine, you know, without preconceived notions, you know, relationship, then all you're doing through most of this time is you're just cutting down all these things that they think you are and saying, I'm not that. I'm not
Absolutely,
that.
absolutely.
And you're basically trying to validate yourself in front of
All
them.
the time. All the time.
And
all
what
the time.
I mean, that's
it's
exhausting.
Yes, exactly.
I'm exhausted
It's
just talking about
exhausting.
it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When was the last time you saw a black man or woman in the ballroom final or semifinal or quarterfinal?
Right.
You don't, right?
Right.
The standard. I mean, you don't, right? Because in some way, shape, or form, no matter whether it's not they have access to, you know, quality ballroom education or what
Right,
or
'cause I
not,
think
whatever.
that's the
That's a
biggest
big
counter for
that's a
that.
big part of that. But also because there is no visibility for it, there is a programming that they don't belong there.
Right.
Whether it is a programming in a judge's mind, maybe, maybe not, or whether it's a programming in the dancer's mind, maybe, maybe not.
Well, I think it goes back also to when they're talking about, you know, little girls and little boys who see themselves on television, right? I never saw myself represented in a certain way in a movie, on a TV, whatever. And so then they didn't feel like they belonged in that industry.
Right.
And so it's the same concept
Absolutely.
here. If you
Absolutely.
don't see good representation of that, then I think a lot of people also, they don't want to be the trailblazer for it.
Well, it's so difficult.
I just want to participate.
Just wanna dance.
Why do I have to be the person that's going to be the
So
poster
difficult.
child for this, you know, to be the one black person in the industry or the one gay person, you know, or whatever.
Absolutely.
Like some people just want to be enjoying the process like everybody else and not have their journey be different.
Oh, absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely. We just live in a society, however, where unfortunately those choices are not within our power.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
This is a huge flaw we have, that our traditional European mindset is kind of overruling the ballroom industry.
Yeah.
Like the things that they're culturally appropriating, they don't, like you can be ethnic, but not too ethnic.
Right.
You know, those
But
types
I feel
of.
like that's not just our industry, that's the world.
Correct.
You know,
which
and
is
so-
why I called the ballroom world a microcosm of the
totally.
existing universe.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
because it is. And
Absolutely.
so that's the thing, is that we are talking a lot about dancing right now, but it is so, I mean, it is exactly what we are going through in the actual world. Is we want you to be, you know, we want you to be black, but we don't want you to be too black. We want you to
Absolutely.
be white, but not too white.
Correct.
We want you to be, you know, feminine, but not too feminine. And all of the things, We've had some celebrities come out and talk about this. We want you to be skinny, but not too skinny.
Right.
Right?
Right.
You know, and everything has to find its own place. And my question is, who is setting these standards? You know, whatever ends up being popular based on whoever is popular at the moment, what the trend is, and then everybody tends to like that. It is a majority vote from society, but what about those things ends up being this is beautiful and this isn't? You know, like I constantly bring up Ashley Graham because I just love how she's body positive and all this stuff. And so many people think, well, she doesn't have to look that way. No, she is that way. That's who she is, and she prides herself on how she works out all the time. It's not that she's not losing weight.
Right.
It's the concept of that this is what she likes to look like, and she keeps herself healthy and fit, and she just had a baby and all these things.
Are you in her doctor's appointments with her? How do you know she's unhealthy?
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
And because we look at that and say, well, she'd be so much more beautiful if she lost like 20 pounds, and it's like, but that's, again,
Your
beauty is in
concept
the
of
eye of the
beauty.
beholder.
Yeah.
And if she believes she's beautiful and her husband thinks she's beautiful, then why does it matter what you think?
100%.
You know what I mean?
100%.
And so everyone puts their own stereotypes, and again, then we get these whole things within our industry specifically as the judges, is because they kind of hold the ticket to the future decision-making process.
Right.
And then, like you said, we tend to want to gravitate towards what
that
is winning.
concept. Yes, exactly.
You know, and then we lose a piece of ourselves in that process.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so while you did make the point and mention the point that that the world is like that in general, there's also phases of the world.
Oh, totally.
Right? There are phases of the world. Like Marilyn Monroe was different from Twiggy. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like
totally.
We you know, we get one concept of beauty, and then we get another one, and then we get another one, and whatever is trending.
Well, and smaller butts were in, and now all of a sudden, because of Nicki and Kim, bigger butts are in.
Right.
Yeah, so you're right. Things change and evolve.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you know, it does. However, in the ballroom world, it's been the same.
Right. We haven't evolved very much.
We really, it's like a snail's pace compared to other platforms.
Right.
You know, other people have platforms. Other body types have platforms in other industries.
Right.
We don't. You know, and I'm speaking of that personally because Oksana and I mean, I think we're really physically fit and we love our bodies and all that stuff, but we've gotten a lot of flack about our bodies. You know, about, oh, you could, and then somebody just told her not too long ago, last year, your dress was great, you look great, the dancing was great, your boobs are just, you know, really big, and they're just really big, and it was distracting. And just like, well, what do you, I mean, it's not like, what do you want me to do? I was born with them. Like, what do you want me to do? It's not like I got not like I, you know, got implants or anything. Right. I mean, this is just a part of my body. This is who I am. And you just said my dancing was good, the dress was good, and then you had to throw that in there. What was the purpose of you throwing that in there? Right. And the whole point is that we do, and that was a judge who judged her. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so that we have this concept, and I'm not saying every judge is like that. I think there's a beautiful array of judges, which is why we have those 11 judges and all the scores are there. But at the end of the day, when you are a judge or a person in power, because you are controlling people's careers and the outcome of people's careers, then you realize the weight of your words. And if you realize the weight of your words, it's very reckless to throw them here and there, willy-nilly. Oh, totally. Right? It's very reckless. Yeah. And so this is where, you know, if it's fine if you appreciate a very specific aesthetic, you know what I mean? We've had this happen to us before, where like we'll look at us and a couple that may be placed right over us, and we're like, oh, we'll look at us side by side on our video, and we're like, okay, we're like watching, like, okay, what are we seeing? Is it a footwork thing? Is it a connection thing? Is it a speed thing? And we're watching, and we're watching, and we're watching. And then at the end, I'm like, no. You know, at the end of the day, we're in an industry where if the couples are close enough in performance and technique, they're just gonna pick the one that they like their aesthetic. Totally. They're just gonna pick the one that they like their aesthetic.
And I think that's the human judgment of it.
Of course,
and
absolutely.
that's something that, again, coming from the Olympics and all of those things, that there's no, when you're judging by a number and you have to beat someone's time in a race, numbers are scientific, they don't lie.
Right.
So, but here, there's so much that goes into it. You know, when you see like World of Dance, they now show the judging process, and it's like we judge on this and technicality and you know, and choreography and creativity and all of this stuff. And it's like, yeah, that's kind of what it takes to judge this industry.
Absolutely.
And unfortunately,
especially if we want to praise artistry and individuality.
correct, because that is not judged by a number.
Right.
That's, you know, that's very hard to judge.
Yeah.
And we kind of try to put a number on it or a placement.
Right.
But that's the thing, is that it's going to end up being, and that's why there are 11 judges, because everyone's going to feel different. They're going to like a certain thing differently. So the idea is that you try to get an average and a balance there.
Right.
But I think the bigger issue is more just the stereotyping of things and just putting on, like you said, we've discussed so many things at this point with black and white, gay, straight, masculine,
image,
feminine.
yes.
You know what I'm saying? Like there's so many different, already when you're born, you're already in so many different categories
Yes,
of life.
absolutely.
That now you have to act. Society has said, you're a woman who's, you know, who's straight, who does this, who, you know, and now all of a sudden you have this thing, and it's like, well, what if I want to do this and this and this? Can I do that? And I think, like you said, the generations now, millennials and Gen Z,
Right.
they're just pushing the boundaries on
Absolutely.
that. They're like, I can do this and I
Absolutely.
will do this.
Absolutely.
And it shocks people.
Yeah.
But again, it's the generational gaps.
It's a huge generational gap
Yeah.
because, and I, as I talk about this, I've been hearing this concept of, oh gosh, things will never change. We're just gonna have to wait until this generation of judges dies off.
out.
And I'm like, how awful! Like when I hear that over and over again,
is.
I'm like, this is awful. Like there's no one who says, you know what? Mental health is important. Body image and body positivity is important. You know what? You should not be ashamed if you're too dark or if you're too this or if you're too that. You should not. There's nobody there speaking up. They're just people who are saying, oh yeah, we agree with you, but we're just gonna have to wait till the judges die off.
Right.
And you're
Oh, no,
like,
totally.
you're like,
But
okay.
people are saying that in life too. They're
Right.
saying, because I had that conversation with my best friend who's black, and we were talking about, you know, race and everything. I said, do you feel like there is a solution or there is progress that's going to be made, or do we have to just wait until, that's what everyone says, until the older generations die off, and then we can start to see the millennials and everyone taking over with new ideas? And she said, well, I guess that's one way to look at it. She goes, but why would you want someone to die with hate in their heart?
Thank you. Thank you.
And I was like,
thank you.
well, now there's a way that's never been said.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And why would you, as a person who's really trying to be who you are, and these millennials and these Gen Zs and all these kids, the Zoomers, if you will.
Yeah.
Why would, you know, when they're trying to find themselves in this world and specifically in this industry, why would you respect somebody with hate in their heart? Respect them enough to pay them money for a coaching.
Right.
Respect them to go to their event.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that's kind of where we're at right now.
Yeah.
I don't
Or
think,
even your grandmother.
Right.
How many people say, oh my gosh, Thanksgiving, and now I have to go and get asked all these questions of why I'm single and why I'm gay and why I'm this. And it's like, this is your own family blood.
Correct.
That is judging you for your truth, and it's almost like you just have to pretend to not have that truth for the weekend.
Ooh, child, don't get me started on that, honey. Don't get me started
But
because
isn't
I
that
was
crazy?
because
and
I
you
was
respect grandma, you
well,
love her.
You have love for her, you
Yeah.
respect her, because, and I speak like this from very, very personal experience. For a while when I first came out, for the first 4 or 5 years, like I had interactions with my family only if I stayed quiet about my life. And when I started to be like, no, I told you guys what I was, this is what I am, here's my boyfriend, here's this, da-da-da-da-da, and just why can't I do like what my sister does and introduce her boyfriend or her husband? Why can't I talk about my life, blah, 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 blah. And when that was a thing where they put their foot down, they're like, you absolutely cannot. And I said, then you absolutely cannot have me in your life. And that's when things went, you know, and I'll talk about that. I'll talk about that story all the time.
No, totally. But it's protecting your own mental health.
Because if I had a child, I would never, ever do that to my child.
Right.
And I understand it comes from a place of love and protection from their end, because they don't want you as a person to kind of fall into a lot of the false stereotypes of being a homosexual, or a lot of the stereotypes,
They
or a
think
lot
your
of the
life's gonna be harder.
my life's gonna be
I've
harder,
been told
right?
that too,
Right.
because I'm in an interracial relationship. I'm like,
Absolutely.
listen, at the end of the day, who you love is who you love, and why does it have to be harder? Find your place. Find where you belong, and your love should be your love. It does not matter what the outside world is judging you on.
Absolutely.
And but like you said, I mean, when we have kids, and we talk about that a lot with Noelle as well, because we automatically think, oh my God, I would never put my kid through this. I would love them no matter what, whatever. But again, that's our generation.
Yes.
We are in a place where we have become accepting
Right.
of who we are.
Right.
We have friends that are black, white,
Right.
gay, polka dot, everything.
Yeah.
And we don't even think about
Right.
it. But our grandparents
Right.
and our parents even grew up in a certain way.
Yeah.
So how do we, is it possible, especially now when we see all these Black Lives Matter movements and protests and everything, is it possible to relearn something that was so solidified in your brain?
Yeah.
That's where I think we're trying to have a switch.
Absolutely.
And do those people want to learn a new way of thinking and acceptance?
See, that's the thing, is that there may not be a solution that people are happy with. And this is where we have to, just because somebody puts their foot down and says, no, I will not do this and I will not accept this about you, does not mean that you have to acquiesce. That may not be the solution you wanted, but at the end of the day, if you met this person and they were not related to you, and you met them out on the street, and they started talking that same crazy BS to you out on the street, you wouldn't even be friends with them. You'd be like, no thanks.
Right.
That's toxic. I'm out of here.
Right.
You wouldn't waste your time. You wouldn't waste your energy, and all that stuff.
But when they're close
but
to
when they're
you.
family members,
Yeah.
we subject ourselves to these toxic relationships as a family member because we grew up with them, we love them, and they're our blood.
Yeah.
People like, blood is thicker than water, and family's important, and family first, and family this. I know I know that that's really wonderful when you have the right family that works for you. But when you don't have that, and they're not willing to change, and if you come at it 80,000 different directions, there's no way that you should continue to put up with any type of psychological or emotional abuse from anybody, even if it's dear old abuela.
Right.
Right.
I think what we've said just in past, or just what I would say a lot, because I've had some of these issues in my own family of just being the entrepreneur. And, oh, well, that's not a real job, or you need to get a real job, or all of these things, and just, but don't forget this. And it's just a negative Nancy all over the place.
Oh, yeah.
And for me, it's healthy boundaries.
Right.
And so, no, I'm not going to dismiss you completely, but you are going to have access to my life as much as I give you.
Correct.
Based on the respect you're giving me.
Absolutely.
And I think that it's been proven for me to be a successful solution to growing better, because then what happens is that then they get curious, they want to talk,
right.
And I will only allow more information to be given if we're going to have like this, an honest conversation about it.
That's beautiful.
And it's going to turn into growth.
I love that.
Right?
And I love that specifically because because the family members that you're referring to are families that actually give you energy to begin with. When they give you a specific kind of energy to begin with, then it is very important that we as individuals take that energy and match it. So we're only giving as much as we're getting.
That's it.
So this way there's not this unbalance, and there's not this resentment, right? Or this expectation of who we think you should be and versus who we are, blah, 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 blah. However, when it comes to family members that refuse to give you any energy with an ultimatum, do this or nothing.
Right.
What are you gonna do?
What do you do?
What do you do at that point? And that's where I was in my life.
I see.
And that's where it was in my life. Because I think healthy boundaries are really, really great. Like, I have healthy boundaries with my students. I have students that are not on the same page politically as me. I have students that are not on the same page, maybe socially as me in a lot of different ways, and emotionally and psychologically. However, we have a very respectful relationship, and we've developed mutual respect over time. But that's where what you're saying comes in 100%.
Right.
Like
you give, I give, and we don't give extra, so we don't feel like we're being taken advantage of.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
I see what you're saying.
Those types of relationships are so important.
Right.
Because they function it's a higher level of functioning. You know what I mean? It gives you access to people without having to give yourself up completely.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
But the ones you're talking about are like when you feel like there's just no balancing and no compromise in sight, and this is who they are. That's hard.
Again, the energy has to match.
Totally.
Again, the energy has to match. If this person says to you, do not bring your husband to the house, what do I do with that information? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, what do you mean? Do not bring so my sisters can bring their husbands, my brothers can bring their wife. Like, I can't bring my husband. Okay. So then I'm not coming because he's a part of me.
That's it.
Right? So this is where this goes. And that's the thing. And I think we have to get to a place of understanding. I think the world understands fear a lot. The world understands fear because the world operates so much out of fear. So when those types of decisions happen, you know they're fear-based decisions.
Totally.
And when they happen out of fear, you literally cannot, as an artist, as a person pursuing mental health, you cannot surround yourself around people who make fear-based decisions.
That's it. Absolutely. No, that is huge. I think that especially in this time right now, like operating out of fear, because so many people are deciding, how do I move forward in this pandemic? How do I do this? How do I do that? Why am I scared of the protests? Because you're afraid they're going to get violent. Why are you afraid of sexuality and people acting in their truth? Because maybe you can't act in your truth, so you're jealous of that. And you're right, it's all based on fear. And if we start to learn to just not let fear guide our decision-making process, so many things will shift.
Oh, yes.
And it's so hard because, easier said than done. I don't like being scared, but I
Right.
have a lot of anxiety around certain things.
Absolutely.
And so I have to remind myself, am I making this decision based on fear and that
Right.
I'm scared?
Right.
Or am I making this decision based on just the decision I'm trying to make?
Sure.
And so I can't even imagine if I had hate in my heart for
Right.
something, how fear and hate would mix together and create God knows what.
We've seen it historically,
We've seen it, Totally. But that's the thing is you don't want to have those two things mix. And if
Right.
anything, you can get, the hate can be, figured out, but I think the fear needs to be really resolved and find the root of the issue. Why are you scared of this? What is causing you to have fear around this person, this situation, this, whatever? And identify what that is and why that is. And I think so many people don't want to be vulnerable with that. They don't want to admit, I'm in the wrong. I'm the one that's scared.
Which goes full circle to what our first initial concept was.
Love that.
People have a fear of intimacy.
Yeah.
Vulnerability equals intimacy. Whether it's self-intimacy or intimacy with other people have a basic fear of intimacy.
Even that word. That word automatically, I know some people are thinking, that word automatically makes me think of sex and sultry and all that. And when I think of the word intimacy, I just think of just closeness, of just vulnerability, of mutual respect. Because I think also a lot of people are having different, if they grow up abused or something like that, to them, intimacy has such a negative
connotation,
space with them. And so then they have to realize that they can have vulnerability and intimacy in a positive space. And so many people don't know how to create that.
Correct.
Or exist in that.
Exactly.
And I think that's where the fear is definitely stemming from.
Absolutely. Which is why I love my job so much and why I pursue it the way that I pursue in terms of the structure of a lesson or my dance partners.
Because you're what an amazing job that you have to create a healthy space for people.
Right.
Like you're actually making a difference in people's lives and showing them what true, honest intimacy can look like. And that has a huge impact on their mental health and emotional health.
This is a very interesting concept that I do when I do teacher training, because I have a couple of studios, well, not since COVID, but I have a couple studios a couple times a year that I'll go and I'll visit and I'll check in on their staff. I do some staff training, some management training, and I'll do some things like that. And this is one of the concepts that I go over, the selling of our intimacy, the proper intimacy, the healthy intimacy, our friendship, our professionalism, our craft.
We're selling time with somebody. We're allowing them into our space.
Correct.
They get to know us. They get to know our personal lives, who we're with, all of those things. And we like sharing that. That's why we're in this industry. But you have to make sure the lines don't get blurry. And you have to make sure that everyone understands their place and what, and certain things may or may not be done according to how things are received.
Absolutely. Dance teachers don't really understand the weight of the responsibility of their instruction a lot of times.
Yeah.
And when you enter into that realm and really understand
Totally.
that you have a responsibility of not just professionalism, but of giving them healthy intimacy and respectful intimacy.
Yeah.
And
But that just goes into the training of, what it takes to be a dance instructor.
Right.
I've definitely gone on a rant on that in other areas, because I feel like our industry doesn't really always hold value of what it takes to be a professional instructor.
Correct.
Because what you're talking about takes a lot of internal growth and work on yourself in order to know how to handle a situation. No matter who comes into your studio, you are able to create. You're able to control the situation.
Right.
And a lot of people can barely control themselves.
Right. Absolutely.
So then what happens is they let normal human behavior get the best of them. And then the situation is completely out of hand, and the student's not going to be the one to take the control of the situation.
Correct.
Because they're indulging in it.
No.
So that's the thing, is that you're
the
solid
instructor,
in
you're the
yourself.
person in power.
Correct. You're the person in power, and you're the one in control, and you have your life and your husband and your partner to worry about, and you can't let the job of it be interfering with the amazing things that you're creating around
Absolutely.
you.
Absolutely.
So
yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You know what? I mean, wow. So many things. I love that whole fear thing, though. That's the thing that I think, just the takeaway from this in general, because I always like to have a good takeaway, good call to action.
Yeah.
But I think if people can start to, I think everything has become very fear-based, and I think it's very. We were talking at the beginning about Facebook and how we get on Facebook and we see all these things and how we've been shocked by some people's things. And I think if we don't allow some of those things to come in and dictate our fear and trigger us, then I think that we just have to be so much more self-aware. Like, this is the age of self-awareness, people.
Absolutely.
Like, get on it.
Absolutely.
Learn what you are triggered by. Learn what you are fearful
Absolutely.
of. And don't let it affect how you behave to other people, because it's going to come off as disrespectful.
Right.
Or you're going to, anger somebody or
Yes.
whatever. And that is what we're trying to spread more kindness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest part is, just because you make a mistake and you're learning and you're growing does not make you a bad person.
No.
Yeah, we don't like to make mistakes. It makes us feel weird and yucky and kind of out of sorts and vulnerable. Yeah, but that doesn't make you a bad person.
No, that's growth. That's
growth.
part of the process.
You learn from that. You
Yeah.
said you and accept the mistake. You know what? I did an oopsie.
That's it.
Help me figure this out. Would you mind? Would you be so kind to help figure this out with me? And
Yeah.
and get somebody in your whoever is in your corner at that particular moment to really kind of help you see through this
And navigate,
and navigate you through this. And I think that this is where we talked about the fear of vulnerability, the fear of intimacy of yourself, where it comes into play, that we oftentimes get so busy with our lives, we do it on purpose, so we don't have to look at ourselves.
Absolutely.
So we don't have to look at
Because
ourselves.
I'm sorry, change, growth, evolving, it's uncomfortable, it's vulnerable, it's scary, it's territories of unknown, and people don't want to go through that. Like, they just don't. They don't want to be sad or angry or just in that space of anxiety.
Because if I have those feelings, I'll take a pill so those feelings can go away.
Right.
And you're like, okay, fine. If you need medication, I'm not doubting that. That's wonderful. Please do, by all means. However, just because you feel normal feelings of sad, anger, anxiety, all those things.
It means you care.
Yes,
There's
okay.
passion there. Like, we're human. That's what separates us from every other species, is the emotional side. And anytime you're going to go from being in one position to another position, there's going to be change, there's going to be growth, and that's not going to be easy. Change and growth is never easy.
Correct.
It's always uncomfortable, and it's always, anxious driven, and because it's scary, it's the fear of the unknown. So don't let that stop you from actually trying to make the change. Like, everyone has to do their own individual change, and it will lead to just a better world and us just communicating better.
Amen.
Right?
Amen.
Woo!
Amen. We just got to church.
That's it.
I had to push my wig back, air it out.
Oh my God.
Yep.
I love you so much. Thank you so
Thank you for
much.
having me.
Oh my gosh, are you kidding? I've been wanting to talk to you for so long. You have
so glad
so
we
much
did.
great things to talk about, and And it needs to be said. These conversations need to happen, people. That's what we're trying to say. Make it happen.
Absolutely.
Amazing.
Yes. Thank you so much. Cheers.